I want to open this panel conversation on a burning question that I have. Why does Zack Snyder keep getting allowed to make movies? I'll repeat it again. Why is Zack Snyder allowed to make films? Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start. I'm Brandon Barber, by the way. Nice to see everybody. Hey. Yes, that's right. I have a show called Fanboy Universe on Chaotic Radio in case anyone ever wants to tune in. I would turn right around and ask the question, well, why not? I don't really understand why Zack Snyder takes such a beating. Visually, his movies for me are fit for comic book movies.
Why comic book movies?
I love comic book movies. I don't get into the whole. I mean, here's the thing about comic book movies. I think nowadays, especially, everyone wants to be a critic, and they're starting to forget that these are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be entertaining, and a lot of that starts visually. Everyone that's always looking for the deep story and the great writing and all that, I mean, that's great to have, don't get me wrong, but comic books are mostly visual. Zack Snyder is a visual guy.
I would disagree. Comic books are about the fusion of...
When you're talking about the movies. You're talking about the movies.
Well, first off, to put it in context, first off, my name's Vince Moore. I write for comicswaitingroom.com under the banner title Omnium Gatherum. I've also written Total Recall, Life on Mars for Dynamite Comics, and I also used to work at Comics Inc. in Culver City, California.
Yeah.
The main thing is that with comics you're talking about the fusion of words and pictures, which is exactly what you have when you're dealing with film. If you focus only on the visual set pieces without even the bare minimum of a quality story underneath, really what you should do is just show a big sizzle reel to everybody. You should have a quality story, a good story, even a basic story. Zack Snyder works best when he has a strong visual and story source when you look at 300 or anything else. But when you look at Man of Steel, he had nothing to guide him. So therefore, you get a lousy story courtesy of David Goyer, and you just get the great visuals.
Were they great visuals in Man of Steel? I didn't notice that.
Were they not? How are they not great visuals in Man of Steel?
Because he's not a very good filmmaker. So in terms of editing, in terms of lighting, in terms of virtually any aspect of filmmaking, he actually sucks.
Okay.
I mean, now,
What comic movie would be great visuals for you?
what would be great visuals?
Yeah, I was just
Well, Stanley Kubrick obviously would be great visuals.
or a comic book movie. I'm sorry.
The first Superman movie that Donner directed. That was great visuals.
I think that it's a good question actually, in that I don't think that there has been a film that's like unbelievably brilliant in terms of visuals so far in comics. I think we'll get there. In terms of superhero films, I think there are some others that are really nice. But no, I'm not sure that there has been, including Snyder. The problem is Snyder can't tell a story. So those are incomprehensible watching them. Okay, I would say that Dark Knight is a pretty good visual film. I think the lighting in that is pretty good. The editing is a little bit shaky, but the lighting, the cinematography is good. That's a pretty well done and well told story. It's also a very well written story. Snyder somehow just guts it, just kills it, so that there's nothing good in the Snyder. I mean, I cried when I saw it.
I say though, with Man of Steel, and I'm not a huge Snyder fan, but I'm definitely not a large Superman fan outside of maybe Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman and Red Sun. There's like one or two Superman stories that's not like blown me away, but he made you like Clark Kent. And Snyder, I think Snyder's Clark Kent is a character that you like. And that's why Superman never shows up in this movie. It's a Clark Kent movie.
It's a lumberjack Clark Kent.
Yeah, I like fishing Clark Kent.
See, I always thought Clark Kent was a reporter. I didn't know he was a lumberjack.
It's a cinematic version. It's not going back to that same thing that we know. And I'm not saying that's right. But when we enter that realm, we enter that arena, we have to accept we're seeing these characters told through whoever's eyes, whether it be the writer, the director, or whatever. They're their incarnation of that character.
The objection I have to Man of Steel is that he's ashamed, the company is ashamed to make a superhero movie in that case. It doesn't mention Metropolis, it doesn't really have Lois Lane, like in terms of being in love with Superman. It denies everything that was in the comics and just wants to make, I don't know, the Fugitive or some weird thing, only he has powers.
Warner Brothers is definitely afraid of a superhero movie.
Right.
And they have been.
And Marvel makes a superhero movie. And that's why, oh, and by the way, to answer your question, Sam Raimi makes a beautiful, movie with Spider-Man 2. That is an auteur film in the way that none of the other ones I can think of are. I mean, you can see Raimi's fingerprints on that as a director in a way that you don't in these other, some of the other ones.
But to touch on the idea that Warner Brothers or DC can't seem to get the film thing right, but there's a contrast with Marvel can't seem to get the TV thing right, and
I can agree with that.
right. So I was talking to somebody earlier this week about that, and we were talking about the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They said there's no superheroes. Is that why Marvel's lacking on the TV side, whereas DC's got it figured out?
Well, I think that's the obvious thing, because when you're dealing with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you're dealing with a program that is designed to show non-powered characters, because superheroes are budget intensive. You can't do them week in, week out. Even when you look at what CW is doing right now, the primary reason why Arrow is a success is because almost every character who's shown up does not require a lot of special effects. It's wire work and martial arts training or martial arts doubles. That's why you can get away with that. The Flash will be an interesting experiment to see, because it's the first time since Smallville, and even Smallville really diminished what Superman did on an episode-by-episode basis. This will be the first time that you get a show that will require the special effects necessary to demonstrate what a superhero can do. Versus Marvel making movies, of course that's a built-in. You can show the big events, the big use of powers, things like that, because that's built into a larger budget. Week in, week out, even at its most expensive, you cannot do superheroes, or it's cost inefficient to do superheroes week in, week out on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Isn't that thing where Oliver Queen climbs that salmon board thing, isn't that like a super special effect? That's amazing.
No, that's called stunt work.
Yeah. What did y'all think of The Flash? Watch the pilot?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought the special effects looked good. For The Flash, with the Wizard, not so, that looked a little hokey, but...
I mean, but hokiness is going to be part of watching this genre unfold, particularly on television, you know, more so than on film, because you also have the forgiveness of the weekly audience, week in, week out, and you're trying to build interest in the characters over the long term. In a film, again, whether it is Man of Steel and Snyder or any of the Marvel projects, you have a 2-hour window, 2-hour and a half-hour window at most. You got to get in, get out. Big visuals can help with that. That's what really can hook that audience versus television, where you have to build people up into the characters. It's a longer term form of storytelling.
Marvel's got 4 projects coming out with Netflix coming up. That's going to be big.
And that's going to be, but that, if you notice, the Netflix projects are almost designed telenovela style. It's one 13-part story, almost akin to what the Captain Marvel series was like. It's going to be one big story told over 13 episodes that people will be able to binge watch, versus how weekly television works, where you can't guarantee that your audience is coming back week in, week out.
But what those Marvel films are also using, or the Marvel television, it's using more non-powered characters as well. So we're not entering that powered universe.
Yeah, and that's definitely the thing.
Well, also, you know, in terms of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's kind of like, you know, what we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, S.H.I.E.L.D. coincides with the heroes. You know, they have a lot to do with the action heroes. So having a show with no heroes at all, I think
second season, so they've already won the race in the sense of they got to the second season. This season they have to build on the outskirts of the Marvel Universe. They can't touch the big players, but by introducing characters like Bobby Morris and turning her into Mockingbird, they can begin to hook that audience by building a superhero on television. And remember, this is broadcast television versus what they're going to do with Netflix. So with broadcast television, you're talking about standards and practices. It's got to go through a lot of lenses. It isn't Marvel. It's Marvel via DC, via ABC. So by the time it passes through all those hands, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ends up as a much more probably watered-down product than Marvel would intend it to be.
Let me ask one more question, then we might open up some audience questions if the panel's open to that. So, on that kind of thought process of building up the character, is the origin story dead for comic book movies?
I don't believe so, though, because while on the one hand these characters are well-known properties and everything is about brand building, you can look at it from that business aspect, you still need to hook audiences. Origin stories, for the most part, are the way you hook the audience into these characters, because usually in most of these origin stories, you show the character as an everyday person to whom this extraordinary series of events happens and takes them forward towards becoming a hero. That works. Now, probably where your question is coming from in part is the recent announcement by Marvel that they weren't going to do an origin story for the Doctor Strange movie. But that actually fits if you know the history of the character. They first did stories with the character before they told his origin. So it was actually work, and because of the magic angle, it actually worked that you didn't know who this character was before this, before you were told his origin. But in that same vein, once you learned who he was, it was still the same argument of how did this ordinary person come to this point?
They also have to get an actor before they can get an origin.
Too true, far too true.
Any questions out there in the audience? Let me deliver the mic.
You saw effects week in and week out. That wasn't a ton of effects, but you got a little. Wouldn't you think that can apply to some of the Marvel stuff that they're gonna, as they incorporate on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and other superhero shows like The Flash?
I think it's a little bit different because even on a show like Grimm, because you're dealing with more of a dark fantasy and horror aspect to the characters where you're dealing with a lot of physical transformation, that's mostly makeup. Maybe some camera tricks are involved. If you're talking about particularly characters in the Marvel Universe, you're talking about mass destruction of buildings, possibly lifting of heavy objects that have to be thrown. It could get a little more intensive. Also, I think it really has more to do with the producers. With Grimm, they know what they have to do week in, week out, and so they go for the maximum that their budget will allow. I think with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in particular, you've got Marvel and Disney being a little more conservative. They want to build that thing for the long haul. They don't want to necessarily do something short and quick and go, okay, we did something that we could do in a movie, but now what are we going to do with the rest of the 19 episodes we have to show the season? Well, yeah, no, they're going to move forward, but I mean, the first season was about getting the audience in. Now that the audience is there, now they can actually build forward.
There's a commonality to this in some respects in terms of television structure. Going back to Buffy having a Monster of the Week competing against an underlying mythology that would come in and out. You would have the same thing in superhero shows often. Smallville in the first season where everybody is interacting with the kryptonite in the field and having metaphors of puberty based upon that. The Flash is doing the exact same structure with everybody's getting their powers from that accident. And so in that way, it's very much like Grimm discovering a new monster each week. So I think it's a television byproduct more than it is a genre one that seeps into most superhero stuff and into more fantasy things like Grimm or Buffy or those things. So it makes them similar in a lot of ways.
Okay, so while, at least in terms of box office, Marvel has sort of been the winner of the past revival of superhero movies. They've done a lot of that based on the sort of interlinking of the stories of the Avengers and now Guardians of the Galaxy. We see that tying in, as we said, Marvel's and S.H.I.E.L.D., whereas DC has been a little more fragmented, where the characters are independent or semi-independent. Which model do you see working going ahead? Is DC's independent model going to work, or is Marvel going to get too spread out, where you've got to see 12 movies to understand the next one? Where do you see it going?
There's not going to be a DC independent model, and there's not going to be a Sony independent model with the Spider-Man films or with the X-Men films. Everybody is doing Marvel strategy. DC has their Justice League films and their different things. They're going to try to copy Marvel, probably unsuccessfully. Sony is trying to do that with Spider-Man, with the villains, and then with Venom, and then so they're all doing the exact same thing that Marvel is doing, hoping that they'll succeed the way that Marvel did. Again, I think if anything, it's in danger of breaking Marvel's model because it's going to fail and then everything's going to come crashing down. I also think that it may fail because of television and what we're talking about, because the model is the exact same as Westerns in the 50s, the way that they became the most popular films, and then because of that, they became saturated on television. Most of you won't remember, but in the 1960s, at one point, 70% of all TV shows were Westerns, and we're watching superheroes just more and more and more to the point where there's going to be 15 or 20 comic book or based shows within the next year or so in production. It's gaining and gaining, and what's going to happen is the films are going to get squeezed out just like they did, which might be interesting, and I'll shut up in a second, but what people say about films, we didn't care if they're good or not, they just want to be fun. I disagree with that completely, but where I think it's exciting is that means maybe because they have to compete with the television shows, they will be taken up by more interesting auteurs, and maybe there will be some great comic book movies to come. We haven't had very many. I think Dark Knight gets close, but we're going to have some really interesting ones because just like Westerns stopped churning out the crap, but instead, in the late 60s, you get the Wild Bunch, and you get The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and you start to get the great ones before it dies. And so we might have like a little bit of a golden era burst before we go on into probably some new thing. Hopefully not with Schwarzenegger. So anyway.
But don't we see that same model in comics? Like, Batman was good, Superman was good, let's make world finest. Let's have the Justice League. Let's hit, now let's have a crossover event. Let's do this, let's do that. And I believe that's the same fun that we're seeing right now played out on the big screen. That we wanted to see these characters now together and build this universe, and let's walk it out together. Let's see what happens when Superman and Batman join. And yeah, eventually, it's going to suck. But in the meantime, let's love it.
It's going to suck pretty quickly because because it's Snyder, because it's Batman. I have little hope.
I honestly, I think that first hour of that movie is going to be beautiful, and then it's going to fall apart. But yeah, I get where you're going with that. But at the same time, Marvel has brought this universe together that makes you want to see these movies. People, 6 months ago, would have never known who Rocket Raccoon was, and now he's the most popular character, hands down. And that's awesome. You have these kids coming in and wanting to read and wanting to know about this universe. They want to know about the Nova Corps. They want to know about the original Guardians. They want to see what Marvel does in space, and that's exciting.
And good for Marvel because they put out a kick-ass Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah. I think, if you don't mind real quick, I'm 38 years old, and so growing up, we didn't really have any movies like we do now, obviously. We had the Superman movies, then came the Batman movies, so on and so forth. You had your campy Fantastic Four and whatnot. We had our TV shows. And so as a fan, strictly as just a fan, I'm happy that we even have everything that's going on. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm supposed to just accept crap. Don't get me wrong. I don't think we should just be happy we're getting them and that's it. But you gotta remember something too. These movies are not being made for us, the true fans. They're being made for people that are not the fans. They know they're gonna get your money. They know they're gonna get my money. Okay? They're trying to get a bigger audience and a bigger crowd. And then you have merchandising that comes into play with the kids and so on and so forth. I just think that sometimes we're a little bit overcritical of the comic book movie. We gotta remember that at the end of the day, you can use the word hokey because it's fake. It's comic book movies. It's supposed to be fun. We're not supposed to be overly critical. I don't go to watch Man of Steel expecting Godfather or Braveheart or anything like that. Yes, Heath Ledger won an Academy Award. I know someone's going to say that, and that's great, and you deserve it. But that's not the point of comic book movies. To me, it's just not the point. We're not watching these to watch Academy Award-winning movies. We're watching these for entertainment, and the entertainment is within you. What entertains you?
Can I just touch on that?
Oh, yeah.
But I saw the TMNT movie. It is what it is. Like, if you like it.
Which one?
The new Turtle movie.
Oh, yeah.
And my niece, she's 7 and 8. Sorry. And she absolutely loved it. And so it is what it is. Like, I want to see this dark, like maybe hard R-rated turtle movie, like something the same that's like East Middle Air. But I would much rather her see a movie that she's in love with and wants to turtle.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's tough to get myself out of that and be like, kids are like it, the toys are no one.
Okay, so the reason that I didn't like Man of Steel, besides the horrible technique, is because it's not because it's not a quality movie or not well written. It's because it's despicable, and I say that because not the quality, but what it says, which is at the end. I grew up with a Superman that knew not to kill people, that had a brain. I went on Father's Day to see Man of Steel because I'm a 2-year-old, Willoughby, and I was very excited to kill him. I left him at home. But I went and I was excited because I can't think of any story in the world that's more of a father's story than Superman, raised by these two, by his genetic background with Jor-El and with his environment by Jonathan Kent. And in this movie, Jonathan Kent is one of the dumbest people I've ever seen, where he teaches Superman, don't save the drowned kids and let me die, even though I'm your mentor, to save this fucking dog. It doesn't make any sense. So you got that, and then you've got Kung Fu fighter Jor-El beating the crap out of the guard in the military, even though he's a scientist. All right, those are just little bits. But at the end, Superman, for no reason that I can see, snaps Zod's neck, and the guy sitting next to me, young guy, your age, goes, fuck yeah! And he's so excited. And I got up and I went in the bathroom and I talked to myself and I said, do I go back in there and watch the rest of this piece of shit? Or do I actually go home and see my child? And I went back, I watched the credits, I stayed, but it crushed me as a Superman fan, somebody who has studied Superman, who's given academic papers on Superman. To watch Superman behave that way was sad to me. And so that's why. So I don't think it's about quality. It's about not understanding the character and treating him horribly.
Well, I also think that, given the fact that Guardians of the Galaxy is not a great story, it's not profound, it's not going to set the world on fire, but it was a well-told, simple story. And that's, I think, what Jim is talking about and what I'm talking about is you can have the great visuals along with a well-told, simple story. It doesn't have to be Hamlet, but but if it's at least at the level of Sons of Anarchy, which, if you know the backstory, Sons of Anarchy is essentially Hamlet. You know, the same way that you can talk about Macbeth, or you can talk about the Chronicles of Riddick, which borrows a lot from Macbeth. Still well-told story. It doesn't have to be high art to be good story. And I think that's it. But going back to the initial question, and then I'll open it up again. I think the Marvel model is going to stick. I think DC is going to do two separate models where they're going to have stuff on the big screen and have stuff on the small screen. They've said they're not going to let them interact. And that's perfectly fine because in a sense that goes back to where the two companies had always been. Marvel always had a very shared universe and DC always had editorially driven, distinct sub-universes within its publishing group.
One more question from the audience, and then we're going to wrap it up. I know, it's such a heated discussion.
Hello. Do you think with the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, we're going to be seeing more large budget, lesser publicly known movies as opposed to the different versions of Batman that come out every few years? Or is it going to be just more of, oh, you recognize this name, we're going to do this?
From Marvel's end, they're going to dig so deep into their catalog because that's all they have. As a movie studio, as a creative entity, all they have are the 4,000, 5,000 odd characters that they own. Not everybody's an A-lister. It's the reason why we have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on television. It's the reason why Daredevil and Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones will all be part of the Netflix deal. They're going to dig deep into their catalog. As far as everybody else is concerned, it's going to be whatever they can pull off. But as long as Marvel's out there, they're going to dig deep. DC might. I still would love to see a Wonder Woman movie, particularly. I would love to see, and I didn't say that for an applause line. I'm still a Wonder Woman fan. I've been one for a long time. I want to see a Wonder Woman movie. I would love to see a Green Arrow, Black Canary movie. I think seeing those two characters on screen would be perfect.
I think you're right that it's Marvel wants to do that. I think these are companies, and Marvel is really only Disney, and is when Ant-Man tanks, Marvel's going to pull back and get more cautious.
Do you think Ant-Man is going to
Why is it going to tank?
I don't think it's going to tank. I think it's going to have a large opening box office, enough to even sequel Ant-Man, and nobody's going to care about an Ant-Man sequel. But I think people are going to say, the company that brought you Guardians of the Galaxy, and everyone's going to go, okay, take my $20.
I think word of mouth on these. The Guardians performed after the first weekend. If Ant-Man,
But it got its sequel after the first weekend.
what's that?
They said they announced a sequel after the first weekend.
Right, because they had no confidence in it before. They were nervous about Guardians, and it did great. So now they love it. But if Ant-Man is a sucky movie, which it has a good chance of being, then that's going to be their first failure, and the media is going to turn it into Marvel finally bombed, and then that's going to cause a shock reaction.
But then they're going to follow that with another Captain America, with another Thor, with another Avengers movie, and those are going to be huge. And so then they're going to make Inhumans. We got lots of them.
I think they're going to say, let's make more Thor and Captain America, but let's never go back and make that mistake and do something like that. I hope you're wrong. I want a Hawkeye.
No, what it really boils down to at this point in the game, and Guardians is the beginning of the proof of that, is that the general audience trusts the Marvel brand name more than anything else. They don't have to necessarily know the characters, but if they see that Marvel brand name, it's the same with the Pixar brand name. It's the same with the Disney brand name. It's the same with the Warner's brand name. They will trust that. Marvel has built up a good enough reputation, and they control the product on their end so well that I think even an Ant-Man movie would have to completely bomb. It would have to cat bomb which is, hey, it's true.
accept the rights department and so I made this without because
movie's gonna rock.
because I want to say that Pixar is going downhill because it makes Cars 2 and Cars 3 and the films aren't as good as they were in that great period.
No, you can roll it.
But they're still doing just as well. You know, so maybe it doesn't make any difference. You may be right.
To answer your question originally, yes.
Well, on that note, we got a tight schedule, so I